Welcome to this webinar about the true business case for technology in business, or why do some business cases for technology fail. As everybody knows, the 21st century and the coming of digital in the broader sense has completely transformed old ways of doing business, or has disrupted the ways which business could be done, making it really impossible to always do what you always did. There are different types of intellectual property which have emerged. There are new sort of business models and operations that could be put in place, but really the 21st century calls for innovation in the way that people, processes and technology operate. But there are two different models here. You've got a business which has started from scratch, where you haven't had anything there in the past, but when you aren't starting with a blank sheet of paper, when you're established, you have to look at things in different ways. And really, we're focusing on those sorts of businesses rather than the blank sheet of paper ones now. Now, in this new world, and in many of those established businesses, the investment case for technology has traditionally focused on cost, and how cost can be reduced. And whilst really being quite straightforward as a business case, this race to the bottom or to the lowest cost has a limit, as there can only be one organisation which can operate at the lowest possible cost. So we need to have a different way of looking at it. And the new business case, therefore, moves beyond that ROI and pure cost saving, which is important, but it also needs to start looking at the impact on revenue and potentially acquisition value, really turning that data, that content, into something of value to the business over a longer period of time. And that really is about better understanding the fact that you are in business to serve your customers, and you therefore need to understand really how your customers are operating, your potential customers, how they currently think and work, and what you need to do to deliver more value to both sets. So in this competitive world, and yes, you do have the Amazons and Ubers of this world which are starting from scratch, but for the more established businesses like GE and many of the financial technology or fintech type businesses which are establishing now, people need to move beyond the what technology, into the why, the who and the how, so that you can understand the short, medium and longer term business in terms of revenue and value of any change. And for traditional companies, or from those companies that have more established backgrounds, they need to look at how those transitions, the movement away from the existing way of working to a new way of operating can happen. We have found in our work across many industries and across the globe that the most successful organisations understand three scenarios when they're developing their 21st century business case. And those business questions, those cases are: what's going to happen if you do nothing different? Many cases that isn't established or looked at in the short to medium and longer term. People don't really necessarily understand what that looks like. There is definitely a focus on cost saving. So you could say, okay, so what could we do to reduce our costs? And also, though, people need to look at the more value-driven business case. And we'll talk about each of these. So the do nothing different, the first scenario. So here we understand the conversation is, we have been making money for years in our business. Our current model is fine. We don't need to do anything different. And the organizational assumptions when you're looking at that business case are that the market context is static. There's no real competition. Technology doesn't pose a threat to the fundamental business model, and that you're sort of secure. But even if you don't think that, you really need to understand what that performance over time looks like. And the graph here, you can see it, you might be fine for a while, but it's inevitable in any competitive marketplace. Things will go down over time. So the second scenario, and this is the classic scenario, and quite often people don't do number one, But this is classically what people understand by the business case. Yes, what's the business case for the CSR system? What are the business case for, the new website or whatever, or the new database? And here the focus is on cost savings. And the conversation is classically, it could be with a sort of person in charge of technology. Oh, you want to buy a new system? Okay, you're the technology person, you create the business case. Show me the ROI model, show me the return on investment. Make sure that these actual cost savings are going to happen. And there are large swathes of many parts of the public sector in the UK and in other countries where this is the conversation. And it's a sort of a very traditional view on the use of technology. And the organisational assumptions here are that new technologies will be causing some level of disruption in the market structure, and therefore you need to look at cost savings. And in this scenario, what we're talking about in the business case is a focus on paperless. That'll be a sort of a word that's being used a lot. Time can be saved, and a lot of the stuff about automation, really at the back end of the value of technology here. Really, really important stuff. And if you look at the graph, what does that mean in terms of profit or value in this scenario, in this focus on cost savings? So initially there's some investment, so that's why the curve goes down a bit, but then you're getting some profit gains. This goes up, the profit gains come through, there's value in the investment you've made, and that's all great. But over time, the value decreases because everybody else has caught up with you. There is this race to the bottom. The cost savings that you've been able to get out have been got out. Therefore, you aren't as relevant necessarily in the marketplace. And you need to focus on other dimensions here. And possibly you can find other areas where technology may make a significant difference. So now if we look at the next scenario, the value-driven focus. And here, this is where the conversation has changed. And this is where the leaders in the business understand that the value of that business stems from how the business engages with customers and leverages the content, the data, the insights in order to better match the supply and demand. And this is in a far more nimble, agile, focused way, very much interactive, not just sort of a one way, this is what we've got, you're going to buy it way. It's changing from that into a far more agile way of operating. And this means that you need to, in terms of the organizational assumptions, think really about the digital reinvention of that business. This business isn't just about producing stuff and getting it out there. This business is about the way we engage with our customers, understand what they want, have this ongoing conversation with them. And it's that conversation that we're talking about. So it's far more focused on the content, the data, the information, the speed of information flow, how that's processed, as opposed to purely the technology, the bits and hardware and software that will enable that to happen. And this may require more investment. It depends on the approach you take. But this new way of working is very much this sort of moving this traditional waterfall approach from a traditional waterfall approach to this more agile, rapid delivery. And here, the value of the business increases over time as this is creating a new identity rather than just a new IT system. And effectively, you're achieving your mission of relating to your customers in a far more effective way. And here, in this model, the graph shape is different again. And you might be looking at potentially increased investment compared to the previous model, but you've got many circumstances you might not. But what you do see is this continual move up of the profit, because what you've done is that you've attracted more customers to your offer, you're delivering more value to your existing customers, and you've got a very different relationship and how you're working in collaboration with your customers as opposed to it being that one-way traffic way of operating. And that's the new business case. So I want to talk about the fashion industry. It's something that we all know. We walk up and down the high streets, we see fashion, we buy it, our children buy it, our relatives buy it, we buy it for other people. So if we take the traditional view of the fashion industry, and this is a number of years ago, it was very, very supply driven. So you had seasons, in spring what was going to happen in, what people were pushing out in summer and potentially autumn. It was a long time in advance, and so you were being influenced by what the powers that be, the supply side, thought was going to be good for you. So very, very supply driven, and that's got all sorts of people involved in it. So you've got the fashion influencers, the manufacturers, the people that were creating the raw products, etc. So that supply side was really very much in the driving seat, and the fashion buyers were sort of being driven by the supply side, and there we are as consumers being told this is what you're going to wear, and it's very sort of pretty one way. Because of the seasonal nature, we're talking therefore of a gap of months between what was going to be pushed out, potentially what volumes were going to be bought, and what then actually appeared in the shops. You're talking gaps of months there. And not very responsive, very one way, etc. So now let's look at the modern world and where we are in a digitally enhanced, consumer-driven fashion industry. And there are businesses now that have completely changed that from being months, very supply-driven, to being a matter of a couple of weeks between where the need is coming from and what the fashion buyers and really the consumers are saying they want to wear, and the supply side that actually fulfilling that requirement. It has actually completely changed this dynamic. So there are businesses now in the fashion world that bring together information at a very local level, say New York or London, about the people in their market locally, what they want to wear, what they want to buy, where exactly they are located, and therefore what the demand is going to be. So you've completely changed the nature of the industry. Now all of that information is coming together to the designers and then subsequently the suppliers to create the products which are going to be demanded by those demographics and those localities and the sorts of volumes that you could be looking for. And that's very, very different. And those consumer-driven trends are really the way forward. And the businesses that have adopted this really integrated approach to talking to their consumers, linking about what they need, and then actually making the whole supply side work to meet that need, are ending up as being really very, very successful businesses. They're the most successful, widespread brands in the world. And they have completely changed the way this market operates. Some of the things they've got there are very integrated customer data analytics. They're monitoring very closely the local purchasing trends, not just from their stores, but from related stores. They also bring in focus groups and user groups information at a very local level, very targeted marketing, and they also have very different relationships, therefore, with their whole supply chain. So it's a sort of far more integrated, customer-driven approach to identifying needs, fulfilling them, and looking at performance. Now, digitally driven value, therefore, can be unlocked in multiple ways. And these are the sort of the value dimensions that need to be understood and increasingly being understood by businesses, and therefore are the sorts of elements that need to be in the business case. If business cases for technology, so the sorts of information that we were talking about and how they were being brought together before, so we're talking about customer data analytics, we're talking about web, we're talking about actual purchasing and orders, we're talking about soft information, we're talking about Twitter, we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about integrating in all of that data at an individual and demographic level, and then looking at integrating that on the supply side as well, the supply chain and how that sort of works. So we're talking about these different data sources, how they get created, how they get collected, how they get analysed to form this sort of full picture at a link in using linked data and information. And that's the sort of approach that we're talking about and how digital value can be unlocked. So the value proposition out of these sorts of things is that New products and business models can be created far faster, so new products can be invented, needs met far quicker. You've got different ways in which the supply can be met. You can change the way the supply chain works. You optimize the way the supply chain works to better meet the needs. You've got a different visibility on what the demands are going to be. Therefore, the supply chain can work in a different way. Again, that means because of that, you can allocate your resources, whether they be marketing for particular consumer groups, whether that be your staffing resources in shops, or whether it's looking at warehouses. And also you can more accurately match demand and supply. So you're optimizing that and reducing the time and managing the cost. Now, if you are transparent about the way that these relationships work, the overhead goes down, and you can do this in sort of very ethically sound ways as well. Clearly, there are also opportunities there to really screw down costs and do other things as well. But those are the choices that individual businesses make, and really what the consumer will buy as well. So there we are, the new business case for the future. Hope you've been able to see what those massive differences are between the traditional ROI business case on focusing on cost and this more integrated, digitally enabled, customer-focused, consumer-oriented business case.